Hey, thank you, Tara. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our event, Business Not as Usual, from our Build Back, Dream Forward event series. I'm Bernard Mustafa, Chairman of the Board of Community Foundation for Northern Virginia. I'm also a member of the Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce, so it's great to have both organizations together. Before we jump into the program, I'd just like to take a moment of silence for the 270 some thousand Americans who've died because of the COVID pandemic, and those in the hospital, and just think about them and make sure we keep ourselves safe. Thank you. So the Community Foundation mission is grow philanthropy to respond to need and see innovation throughout our region. This year, we awarded more than $2.3 million in grants through our COVID Relief Fund for Northern Virginia to help mitigate the impact of the pandemic on our community. At the same time, we awarded more than $13 million in total grants and scholarships from our donor advised fund, discretionary funds in areas such as child and youth development, education, military personnel, health, mental health and aging, poverty relief, the arts, and the environment. Through our grant making, leadership initiatives, events, community strategic investments, we're committed to build a community that works for everyone. We are pleased to be co-hosting today's program with the Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce to discuss how our community can build a more equitable and broadly shared prosperity for Black business owners in our region. We invite you all who have joined to enjoy your lunch while you tune in, and submit your questions for our panelists through the Q&A box to be addressed later in the program. And before we welcome today's keynote speaker, I'm pleased to introduce Sheila Dixon, the Executive Director of Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce, to share a few words. Sheila.
Thank you, Bernard, and welcome everyone. The Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce is pleased to be co-hosting this event with Community Foundation for Northern Virginia. Eileen, I would like to thank you and your team for inviting us to be participants today. The Chamber's mission is to identify our resources and establish opportunities for our membership and advocate for Black enterprise in Northern Virginia and our surrounding areas. This year, we've focused our activity to build the Chamber for this new economy. We've increased our membership by 75%. Organizations are coming on board to support us, such as Rheingold, Google, Dominion Power, Networking and Engineering Technologies. They are actually financially supporting our mission. I, as a citizen of the Northern Virginia community, fully understand each professional must continue to address the difficult conversations that have been exposed in our community. I also believe that each conversation and each positive action step a citizen makes contributes to systemic change and advances the vibrancy and the prosperity in our communities now and for the future generation of Northern Virginia. You know, many of our chamber members are thriving through this economy, and that they're coming together to create and open new opportunities for one another. It's been great to work with the economic development partners. They're also ensuring that we're offering opportunities for Black enterprise. Our government leaders are also including us in conversations so that we can continue to strengthen the relationships between Black businesses. Today, as we set the framework for the topics discussed, I wanted you to take a moment to digest some of the following points. And me personally, as an executive director of the Northern Virginia Black Chamber and also a professional in our community, I ask and hope that you will personally make a commitment to implement actions today in your lifestyle and in your business acumen to decrease the wealth gap in our Northern Virginia community. So let's talk about some of the following things we're going to address. Entrepreneurship and business ownership, particularly of community-based businesses, are crucial ways to develop community wealth for both business owners and the people they employ. So I ask you, what action step can you take today? Healthy Black-owned businesses could be a critical component for closing the United States Black and white wealth gap, which McKinsey Company project will cost approximately $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion per year by 2028. I ask you again, what action step can you take? Of course, the COVID-19 crisis has further stressed Black-owned businesses and may cause the racial wealth gap to widen. Between February and April of this year, 41% of Black-owned businesses shut their doors under economic pressure caused by the pandemic, compared with 17% of white-owned businesses. I ask you, what action can you take? 75% of initial PPP loans went to businesses in majority white census tracts. Between 2001 and 2018, the number of Black-owned financial institutions declined over 50%, leaving only 21 Black-owned banks in the United States. I ask you, what steps can we take? So with compelling data, I'm going to ask you, how do we fix what's broken? I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for today's program, Andre M. Perry, a fellow in the Metropolitan Policy Program at Brookings Institute. He is also a scholar in residence at American University and a columnist for Heckinger Report. His research focuses on race and structural inequality, education, and economic inclusion. Dr. Perry's recent scholarship at Brookings has analyzed Black majority cities and institutions in America, focusing on valuable assets worthy of increased investment. Welcome, Andre.
Yes, let me make sure. Yes, how are you? How's everyone today? I'm Andre Perry. I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution, where I study Black majority cities, and I'm somewhat of a neighbor. I just moved to the National Harbor, so I literally run across the bridge into Northern Virginia pretty much every other day. So I'm glad to present to you. I'm trying to pull up my PowerPoint here. So let's see here. Here we go. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry about this. Come on. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm just having a little difficulty starting the slideshow. I can start. PowerPoint. Come on. I don't see. Come on. Where is it? I apologize, sir. Come on, Andre. One more time. That is not. I'm going to share something and then I'm going to leave it. Sorry, for some reason it's not share. Oh my goodness. I apologize. I'm coming out. I promise you. Here we go. Share screen. Very good. Here we go. Share computer sound. Can you see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay, very good. My presentation, a lot of the data you'll be able to find in my new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. which is available in fine stores located near you. I'm at the Brookings Institution, where I study Black majority cities and towns and neighborhoods. In this map, you can see there are several. There are more than 1,200 majority Black cities, and there are thousands more neighborhoods. And I want to focus on assets in those that impact business development. So we're going to start there. But I'm going to start at home, because a lot of people know this, but they forget that most people start their businesses using the equity in their homes. By far and away, most people do. This is where I grew up. This is 1320 Hill Avenue, Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. It's a small Black majority municipality surrounded by Pittsburgh on 3 sides. And as you can see, the home is boarded up. The roof is bowed. It's essentially worth $0. You can claim it by stating that you want to pick up the taxes from the municipality of Wilkinsburg. But the home means so much more to me because of this woman right here, Elsie Boyd. That's the woman I call Mom. She made a deal with her, my maternal grandmother, that she would take me in when I was born. And sure enough, when I was born, she took me to 1320 Hill Avenue. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to stay for a few weeks or a few months, but I ended up staying my entire childhood life until I graduated from high school. But you can see here, she also took in kids from various parts of the neighborhood. Some would stay a few weeks. I would stay, and my brothers would stay until we graduated from high school. And again, I was informally adopted. It wasn't foster care or anything. It was anything like that. It was just a tradition that people took in kids. Now, this is my father. One of the reasons why I had to go to Mom's house is that he was a heroin addict. He was in and out of prison. Eventually, he was killed in prison. That he was murdered with a single stab wound to the heart a day before his 27th birthday. In the Jackson Penitentiary, located right outside of Detroit. Now, I wanted, in writing my book, Know Your Price, I really wanted to follow where he lived and how he died. And it led me to looking at home prices. So I'm going to start off talking about home prices and its impact on business, to show you the impacts of devaluation on business. Now, this is a chart that looks at home values by the concentration of Black people in a neighborhood. So if you can see on this x-axis along that bottom line, that's the percentage of Black people in a neighborhood. On the y-axis is indicated as the price on top of those bars. Those are areas, those are the average price within those areas. So you can see the average price of a home in a neighborhood where there's less than 1% of Black people. Those homes are priced about $340,000, and it's pretty linear. As the neighborhood increases in Blackness, the home values drop. Now, a lot of people will say that's because of education, that's because of crime, but those are things you can control for in a study. So I took the absolute price difference, and I controlled for structural characteristics, so the number of rooms, the size, all those different things. And I looked at neighborhood amenities, so education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics. And what we found that homes in Black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Accumulatively, there's $156 billion in lost equity. $156 billion in lost equity from Black neighborhoods. And this is occurring all across the United States, not just in the DMV, but you see magenta circles wherever there's devaluation. The DMV is 15.4% difference, about $48,000 per home. So, again, I wanted to start there to show you the loss of revenue before I get into business. So Lynchburg, Virginia, 81% difference in Lynchburg, Virginia, 81%. So these are equivalent homes, equivalent social circumstances, same education, same crime, 81% difference. Rochester, New York, 65%, Jacksonville, 47. There are places wherever you saw those green circles, those are places where home values in Black neighborhoods are actually priced higher. And so Nashville, plus 10%, Wichita Falls, plus 16, Boston, plus 23. Now, let's be clear, Boston is no less racist than the DMV, but the home prices are different for sure. Now, I just want to put this 156 billion in perspective because it's a big number. It would have financed more than 4.4 million Black-owned businesses. It would have financed more than 8 million four-year degrees. If we're going to talk about talent, it would have financed more than 8 million four-year degrees based on the average amount of a four-year public education. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan nearly 3,000 times over, covered all of Hurricane Katrina damage, and has doubled the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. The reason why I put that last bullet in, my father was a heroin addict. He was in and out of prison. If he lived in a neighborhood where home values were properly priced, he would have had much greater likelihood to start a business. His drug use would not be criminalized. He would have had better opportunities to go to college. It's a big difference. This is why I say that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. And so when we talk, I'm going to get into this more, but when we talk about business owners, when we're talking about Black communities, let's not talk about quality of business. Let's not talk about the lack of know-how. Let's look at policy. So now I'm going to just briefly show you a clip, and hopefully you can hear this, of me testifying on this very issue, because there's a lot of people who will deny racism is occurring in various sectors. Listen to this.
If you think Black people are being discriminated when their property is being appraised, would you kindly raise your hand? One person on the panel. If you think that, for fear that I'm not communicating well, if you think that Black people are not being discriminated against when their property is being appraised, if you think they're not being discriminated against, kindly raise your hand. Okay, hands now, we're getting some consternation, I see.
Now, I'm going to just show you highlights of a report I did similar to the housing report that gets into the devaluation of businesses. Now, again, remember, most people start their businesses using the equity in their home. So one of the reasons why we don't see more Black businesses is because of housing. And so whenever you work on an effort, if you're not talking about housing, you're also not talking about businesses. You got to think both. You got to look at the overall, using business terms, ecosystem when you're talking about business development. Now, we know that Black people represent about 12% of the population, but only 2% of the nation's 5.7 million business or businesses with at least one or two employees. So employer businesses, only 2%. Only 1% of Black businesses were able to attain their loan in their founding year, compared to 7% of white entrepreneurs. And again, I keep pressing this. Because most people, white, Black, whoever, start a business using home equity. Black entrepreneurs are denied loans twice as often. And when we do get loans at worse interest rates, about half of businesses survive the Great Recession compared to 60% of white-owned firms. And we know that during this current recession, that number might be worse because of the PPP loan fiasco. 95% of Black businesses, when it was rolled out, did not get it. Some of that, it was structural because of a lack of relationships to mainstream banks. The nature of businesses, or a higher percentage of Black firms are sole proprietorship, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. But I wanted to get to this issue of quality and investment. This is Dorian Moorfield. He's founder and chef in Pittsburgh. He has a highly rated business. This is him holding up a breakfast steak. When I visited his store, his restaurant, he looked to his customers and he said, "Who has the best breakfast steak in town?" And everybody said, "You do, Dorian, there you do." And it was hilarious. But it's a great business, highly rated business. It's in an area that's gentrified. It used to be in 2010, it was essentially 99% Black, which is 100% Black. But but now it's about 80% Black. So in 10 years, it's becoming gentrified. And they're actually seeing an increase in services, which you shouldn't have to see white people move in order to get services, but that's beside the point. But I wanted to look at this issue of business quality, because in those earlier slides that showed the lack of investment, a lot of people will say that it's because of the quality of the business. It's because of the service. It's because of the lack of financial literacy and all these different things. So we looked at business revenue and the race of the businesses across the country. And you can get that from Dun & Bradstreet. We purchased that data. But we scraped all the Yelp data from businesses across the United States to get a sense of quality. So we scraped all, so I know what your business looks like. We could see what your business looked like in terms of reviews. Now, I just want to preface this. Yelp is better used for sort of restaurant services, neighborhood-facing businesses. So, but that was fit in line with what I'm going to talk about. But we scraped all the Yelp data to get those. But then we controlled for neighborhood conditions again. So I just wanted to get apples to apples comparison between businesses in Black neighborhoods and businesses in white neighborhoods. And what we found is that Black, brown, and Asian-owned businesses actually score higher on Yelp. But when you control for sector, there is no difference in quality. So this idea that we can't invest in Black businesses because of whatever quality issue, because of capacity, that doesn't hold up. The consumer rating products are absolute valid tools for measuring business acumen. If you score high on Yelp, it generally predicts for quality management. So what we found is that Black businesses are just as good. But here's the big caveat. They get fewer ratings and less revenue as the concentration of Blackness increases. I'm going to explain. So here are minority-owned firms, Black, brown, and Asian-owned firms on this magenta line. They score higher than their white counterparts. And it's not significantly higher, but it's higher. But as the concentration of Blackness goes up in a neighborhood, the ratings and revenue go down. Now, again, Black people are, Black, brown, and Asian businesses, I should say, score higher consistently. But everyone, Black and white, go down as their businesses are concentrated in Black neighborhoods. This is costing highly rated businesses upwards of $4 billion annually. $4 billion. There's a saying in Black communities that, at least the elders used to say this when I was growing up in a Black community. They used to say, our ice is just as cold. They knew that if you bypass quality in the hood, you distort the market in a way that you force highly rated businesses to compete with lowly rated businesses. And you essentially reduce the amount of revenue in a neighborhood. So I break all this down, or I'm going to share with you some remedies. The reason why I did this exercise is because I just want people to know that their perceptions are not reality. That housing is better than it is priced. Businesses are better than they are invested in. Infrastructure, I mean, so we're doing all these efforts to show the value in different assets in communities. The reason why I focus on Black communities is because I wanted to isolate race, just to see the impact of race. So you can take a lot of this. If you're a Black firm and you operate in a white community, this generally holds true as well. The perception of the business is driving revenue down. The perception based on race is driving revenue and investment down, and it's robbing all of us of the revenue that we should all be benefiting from. Now, there's some remedies to this. We need to direct capital to minority-owned firms. I mean, this is what largely this is about. Direct capital to people. Now, I just want to go to the right-hand side just for a moment. If you invest in place and not people, which a lot of opportunity zone projects are doing, you're investing in brick and mortar, that essentially forces gentrification. You'll raise property prices and people's incomes and won't keep up with the property taxes, and then folks essentially are pushed out. So you have to invest in people first, and we'll talk about place. The other thing about this research, we got to remove the unnecessary bureaucratic barriers to entry for entrepreneurship. Now, what this means is get rid of the programs. Get rid of the programs that say you need to go through some kind of financial literacy, accounting course or whatever. It doesn't hold up. The data shows that the quality is just as good in Black businesses. What they're not getting is the investment. And so we got to get rid of like these quote unquote programs that assume that the quality is not as good. You shouldn't have to jump through these hoops. Now, we do need targeted investments in Black neighborhoods. Now, my work focuses on a lot of underappreciated assets, meaning if you add water, it will grow. Where you're going to see the biggest economic boom is in businesses in Black neighborhoods, because that's where they're currently undervalued. And so if you strategically find commercial corridors in areas that you see this kind of devaluation, the revenue for the region increases dramatically. That's to say, to double down in an area that's already in getting investment, you're not going to see the boom. And so we need to target investments in Black and brown neighborhoods so that not only do those businesses grow, but those communities grow, but the region grows as well. We also need to partner with businesses and developers to incentivize businesses to operate in Black parts of town. And so one of the fears I had when releasing this report, I didn't want a business owner to say, I'm getting out of Black communities. Because if what this essentially is saying, that same business in a different area will get a lot more revenue because the quality is just as good. And so we need to figure out incentives to move businesses in the areas that are devalued. And when I say devalue, I just want to be clear. It is sort of this idea that it's not as good, but the data the data is clear that these are quality projects. These are quality businesses. These are quality homes, and they're undervalued. I'm going to actually close this out. I just want you to share one other piece of data for me. Now, I just want to, let me see here, this certain point. Currently, Black firms bring in an average revenue about a 1 million compared to non-Black firms, which is 6.5 million. If Black firms increase their average revenue to the level of non-Black firm, that would increase total revenue in Black businesses by $800 billion. $800 billion. Now, there are about 1,200 Black-owned businesses that account for 2%. I mentioned that earlier. Now, if Black-owned firms accounted for 13.4 employer firms, if we increase that 2.2 to 3.4% of employer firms, there would be nearly 750,000 more Black firms. 750,000 more Black firms. If we saw in Northern Virginia, this is what it means. You have a sole proprietor, an LLC. Now, we're not talking about like a Lyft driver or, something like that. Not that kind of sole proprietorship. I'm talking about that engineer that owns the LLC but doesn't have employees. If we say increase those firms, you're talking about 750,000 more Black companies. Okay, and I just wanted to throw a couple other numbers at you to show the potential of what can happen. Currently, Black firms bring in an average revenue about 1 million compared to non-Black firms of 6.5 million. If Black firms increase their average revenue to the level of non-Black firms, that would increase the total revenue in Black businesses by 800 billion. 800 billion. Now, you can look at this selfishly and say, oh, that's about Black businesses. That's not about me. No, this is about the revenue for the region. The region is losing out on this 700, the 800 billion. Well, this is the nation, but every region is losing out on revenue as a result. Every revenue, because we're simply not investing in Black businesses. And so I'm going to close there. But the point of this exercise was to show that Black businesses are quality business, and when we don't invest in them, and again, not the programs, not investment. We know what investment looks like. When we see the direct capital, you see the direct benefit to the region. And so that's what I want the main message to be, that this is not about simply about increasing the number of Black businesses. This is about increasing revenue for the region. And we need to absorb that. We need to understand that. And again, a lot of this can be found in my new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. And you can get it for at discount now on the Brookings website if you go there. So, but thank you for allowing me to present this information. I'm sorry for the glitches. I for some reason, I couldn't find my PowerPoint in the sea of apps. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Andre. And I'm glad to hear that you're also from Pittsburgh. I too am from Pittsburgh. So looking forward to connect on that level as well.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So at this time, I'm pleased to welcome B. Doyle Mitchell Jr., President and CEO of Industrial Bank, the largest and oldest minority-owned commercial bank in the Washington metropolitan area, and the fourth largest African-American-owned financial institution in the country. The bank provides a full range of quality banking and financial services, including residential, commercial, small businesses, and SBA loans. And its mission is to promote the financial and economic empowerment of its diverse communities. So Doyle, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm almost speechless because Dr. Perry's presentation was so awesome. I've been in this business for a long time and really just got an aha moment from Dr. Perry. So thank you, Dr. Perry, for your presentation. That was pretty fantastic. And I had some areas I wanted to touch on, and you just kind of shifted the whole presentation for me a little bit. And Tara, I told you I had to leave, but I'm just going to have to stay on as long as I can, given how awesome that presentation was, and some of the questions I saw in the chat, and some thoughts that it really gave me. So I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, but get to the point as quickly as I can. First of all, I just want to thank the Community Foundation of Northern Virginia and the Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce for having me and presenting this forum so that we could have this important discussion. I myself am a founding member of the Greater Washington Black Chamber of Commerce. We're very young, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years old, and to believe all of these years, Washington, D.C. specifically did not have a Black Chamber of Commerce was one of the reasons I jumped in to do that. And not to mention, my grandfather was a founding member of the DC Negro Chamber of Commerce, now the DC Chamber of Commerce. So anyway, Sheila mentioned something earlier over and over again. She said, well, what will you do? What is our reaction to what we are hearing today? And it's difficult for me to speak about anything related to Black economics without mentioning that we have got to support our own businesses. We spend $1.3 trillion every year, and only 3% goes to Black businesses. And if we increase that to 10%, according to Maggie Anderson, whom many of you may know or have heard of in her book, Our Black Year. If you haven't read it, it's a must read. It changed my life, even though I have been supporting Black businesses in one way or another for a very long time. It changed my life. So you should check that one out, as well as Dr. Perry's book. I'm not going to go into the history of the bank. We've been around since 1934. We were founded by my grandfather, much like almost all other African-American banks around the country. I think at one time in the 30s or 20s, we may have been up to almost 100 Black-owned banks. And we were all founded in low and moderate income areas because those were the areas where Blacks were relegated to, early on after the Civil War, and our migration to the North or other areas in the South, or even the Midwest. And if you haven't read The Color of Money by Dr. Baranadan, if I'm getting her name correctly, professor of law, you need to read that because it gives a lot of explanation as to how we got there. So I won't go into a lot of the history of the bank. I'll try to get into some of the things that I think you want to hear. But one of the things in the chat I will address was the question: is there still discrimination in lending? Can Blacks get a home equity loan as easily or on equal terms as whites in this country? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. In the downturn of 2008, I think shortly after that, Federal Reserve did a study, and first of all, Black and brown people were less likely to get a home loan on the levels that whites are or were at the time, and still are, and I'll go into that in a minute. But the terms were different. We paid more points, we paid a higher rate, all of those things, even when they got behind the numbers and saw that the applicants were just as equally qualified. And that persists today. Dr. Perry mentioned about the values of our homes. And I think there was a Wall Street Journal article very recently about a interracial couple that when the Black woman answered the door, her appraisal came in at one value, and when the white spouse answered the door, the appraisal came in at another value. And I do some work with the National Association of Black Realtors, and they've been exploring these these same types of things. It amazed me in Dr. Perry's discussion just how homes in Black neighborhoods are valued and even undervalued when you take out certain factors such as he did, because many businesses are started, most with the value of the equity in their home. And if we have lower equity, then that either decreases the amount of loan that we'll qualify for, or maybe in some cases negate, having those backup assets like your home altogether. So one answer to the problem is we have to increase our home ownership rate. Our home ownership rate is almost 20 points lower than white Americans, and Black Americans. We have to figure out ways to increase our home ownership rate. And I think one of the reasons is lack of information. There are many programs that Industrial Bank uses in the region to find down payment assistance money, closing cost money. We have done first-time home buyer loans where we have put 2 and 3 different programs together and came up with, $30,000, $40,000, $1,000 for first-time home buyers. Now, it's not an overnight sensation. It takes time. Sometimes you have to go through classes. Sometimes you have to clean up your credit, but it can be absolutely done. We've seen it. We love to do it quite often. So, if you don't have those assets, yes, that is going to overflow into your ability to get a business loan. But increasing the value of, or closing our income gap and our wealth gap is not just a Black problem. It's not just a Black problem. It's an American problem. If our wealth gap is closer, maybe even by 50% to where white Americans are, then for those out there that don't like big government and don't like paying a lot of income tax, I don't like paying a lot of income taxes, can't stand it. So, ideally, I would love a smaller government, but wealth changes a lot of different things. It changes where you can send your children to school, the amount and the quality of education that they can get, the quality and length of education that children get, Black or white, is correlated to the amount of money you'll make later on in life. That keeps a lot of people off the street, that keeps a lot of people out of the criminal justice system, sending people to jails and prisons. It's expensive for the American taxpayer. So if we solve for the wealth gap, we take care of a lot of expensive social ills that we all have to pay for in our taxes, and which requires larger government. I will say this, in my experience as a lender and as a banker, first of all, you're not going to go to a Black bank and they're not going to discriminate against Black people. So you figure out the rest on that. There are a lot of reasons why Black people receive loans, PPP loans, at rates less than white businesses. And to start with, the large banks, when they were doing PPP loans, they got to a point where they just stopped. They just didn't want to do anymore. I'm not going to say that they preferred white businesses over Black businesses. I would say that they preferred larger companies over smaller companies. Now, you make your own determination how that plays out from a racial standpoint. But in Washington, D.C., I saw many, businesses, white and Black, that were looking to community banks and banks that they did not do business with for PPP loans. And, generally speaking, if you start to ignore small businesses, Black businesses are going to get hurt disproportionately worse than white businesses. So, I think there was some collateral damage there. But we are always impacted more than others. Here's the other reason I think that we did not get the PPP loans that we should be or should have been entitled to is, and I say this all the time, and it's not about the quality of the business. I think I have seen Black businesses that they know how to make a widget as good as anybody else in the world. It has to do with being not as well financed. So if you're a widget maker and you're not as well financed, you may not be able to buy the raw materials in bulk the way some other businesses may. And if your costs are higher because you can't purchase in bulk, then your prices when you put them on the shelf may be a little bit higher. It's not that we're not as good, but having to run a business on a shoestring does have other consequences that impact what might be the outwardly appearance of quality. It's not because Black people are not any less smart. It may have something to do with whether you're able to hire an accountant for your business, or a good accountant, or 2 bookkeepers when you need 3, whatever the case is. So in that PPP environment, we saw that a lot of our businesses did not have their records together, and it took them longer to pull records and data together that needed to go into the PPP application. Now, I'm not going to start talking about the whole PPP loan process. I think it was probably the best the federal government could have done under the circumstances. And to be honest, when you run it through the SBA is a very legalese organization. I mean, they want to check boxes, dot I's and cross T's, and banks nor borrowers really had the time for that. And I think it was overly complicated, but that's just the culture of the SBA. And whether that's a good thing or not, I won't question that. But the result was many small businesses were not prepared. They may have not had even closed the books for 2019, or maybe even 18, much less able to bring up to date certain requirements of that program. There's nothing more I can emphasize for small businesses than to make sure you have your books and records together extremely, extremely well. And you know what the banks are looking for. Large banks don't necessarily want to do small business loans in the first place. And I can't blame them. If you're $1 trillion institution, you want to do big deals. We even find the pressure of wanting to do $1 million, $2 million loans more today than when I can remember 25 years ago. Doing a $50,000 loan was really exciting. Not that we won't do it, but the larger you get, it's just hard to focus in a big way to small businesses. And so ergo the necessity for community banks. One more thing, and I'll be quiet. Someone really just took the words out of my mouth in the chat, and they said, well, how do we what can the chamber do to interest angel investors in Black businesses? And I'm glad you asked. 20 years ago, I was invited to sit on a board, American Association of Venture Investors, or whatever it was called. And once a month, it was made up of some angel investors, some venture capitalists. I was the only Black, I was the only banker on the board. And they had a small staff that screened deals. And once a month, the board had, picked about 3 or 4, and they made presentations to these angel investors. And I thought a lot of these deals were really, really good. But these guys, I mean, they kind of chewed them up and spit them out over eggs and bacon, in the morning. But I thought to myself, because none of the companies were Black, why don't we have something like that in our community where we can really put businesses to the test of getting outside investment? And I think it's one thing if you're accountable to yourself as a small business, but you really improve the quality of your business if now you have to make a pitch and justify what you would like to do and what your plan is when you have to make it to other business people. So I love that idea, and I think that's one of the things that maybe the Black Chamber can consider. And if the Black Chamber knows of angel investors, put them in the room as well, because angel investors ask questions that even I as a banker don't ask. When you come to a bank, we charge the least to provide you a loan. You go to an angel investor or venture capitalist, you know, they want 15, 20, 25, 30%. And then they want their money back in 3 to 5 years. So they have a different perspective, which I think is very healthy for small businesses to hear. So I will stop there. Discrimination in lending, in appraisals, even in home purchasing is still present. But you know what? I'll leave you with this story. I think when we start to spend more of our money, and even whites, I see a lot of whites that want to support Black businesses. And like I said, it's an American problem. As long as Blacks are on the bottom rung of the economic totem pole in this country, it's not only going to continue to result in an economic drag, but a social drag on all of us. If you think back to the bus boycotts success had nothing to do with social mores. It had everything to do with finances and where we spend our money. Bus companies going broke. That's what brought about the change. So where we spend our money is extremely, extremely important to either say, I don't like the practice of that company over there, or I need to do a better effort in supporting Black businesses. If we take more than 1.3 trillion and spend it in our communities, we'll change the whole paradigm, because now there will be competition in our community for those banks or those businesses that are kind of at the top of racial discrimination. So I'll stop there, maybe answer a few questions later or in the chat.
All right. Doyle, thank you so much. Thank you, Doyle. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Sheila, for such thoughtful framing comments. I really appreciate it. I am Eileen Ellsworth. I'm the president and CEO of the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia, and it's my honor now to welcome our panelists to today's event. Their full bios are in a program that Tara Nadell would have sent you all either yesterday morning or this morning, depending on when you registered. So I'm going to be brief in the introductions, but you can read it in Tara's email. So I'm going to start with Dr. Tashaka Cunningham, Chief Science Officer of True Genomics, a precision behavioral health company advancing the diagnosis and treatment of PTSD through a patented genomic biomarker assay. Welcome, Dr. Cunningham.
Great to be here, Eileen.
And Carmen Felder. Carmen is a local entrepreneur and business owner as well. She's the founder of a public relations, career management, and branding firm called Authentic Connections. She's a disabled United States Air Force veteran, and she's the chair of the Black Business Empowerment Committee at the Loudoun Chamber of Commerce. Carmen, welcome.
Thank you.
Arlene Sinclair-Robinson, Assistant Director of the Business Finance Center at the Community Business Partnership in Fairfax. The Community Business Partnership is a nonprofit, a really important one locally here, promoting small business growth in Fairfax County through full service educational, technical, and other support services to small local business. Welcome, Carlene.
Thank you.
And finally, Stacy Yee. Stacy is a partner and the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, here to share with us today a new program that Pillsbury has recently launched that is going to provide literally millions of dollars in pro bono legal services to Black-owned businesses across America to help address the very inequities that our first speakers have just so beautifully described. And Andre Perry is also joining us on the panel. So let me start, Dr. Cunningham, with you. Ask if you could please describe True Genomics, what its work is, its unique value proposition around the treatment of PTSD.
Eileen, yeah, it's so great to be here, and what a great forum. Yes, my company, True Genomics, we're a biotechnology company in the area of genomics, which is the study of your DNA and RNA and how your genes work to underscore different disease conditions. And we're advancing a first of its kind product that will be a blood test that can help us diagnose early folks who are most at risk for PTSD. And this is really important for people in the military and many fields that encounter traumatic stress, so that we can identify individuals before they would get to the point where they would commit suicide due to the mental and behavioral health challenges. So we're at the cutting edge of technology here in this discipline, and newly located to the Virginia area, the Northern Virginia area, because I'm a Northern Virginia resident. And it's just been a really interesting experience the last few years, me being an entrepreneur, particularly an entrepreneur of color in this space, because there's so few of us in this area of biotechnology. So I've got a lot of thoughts and things to share around that. It's a little different than, let's say, setting up another type of business in another type of industry. These high technology industries have a high barrier of entry. It's a lot of money required to get them off the ground and get them going. But as you've seen in numerous cases, they can be very profitable once they do get going. And I'm very excited about our company because we're getting to that point where we have raised some funding. We are now getting revenue coming in, and we're hiring people. So we're becoming job creators, which I'm very excited about. And again, diversity matters. I'd say 60% of our staff is diverse, and they're very talented. So that the concept that Dr. Perry put forward, that people thinking that Black is not as good, that has never been our experience. And we're looking at creating jobs for everyone in our discipline because we don't discriminate. So it's a really exciting time, and that's what we do.
So going back, just a follow-up question there, in the tech space, angel investing, early investing is really crucial to get the business up and running. Can you share an experience or two you've had with you and your co-founders that highlights the challenges with these systems for entrepreneurs of color, the challenges in the existing financial and economic systems, especially for tech leaders?
Absolutely, and that's going to be my book. If you hear this, I'm going to write a book on that, my co-founder and I. Just our experiences as African-American entrepreneurs. And our executive team, our C-suite team, is 2 African-American males and a Caucasian female. So minority and women operated, and 2 are service-disabled veterans, so veteran-owned and minority. And what has just been stunning to me has been some of the questions we've gotten from VC investors when we've pitched. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So one would be after the pitch, everyone's sort of, they will go through your slide deck and your materials with meticulous care. But then you get to the point where, and they'll try to pull it apart and they'll say, well, they don't really have anything else to say. They'll be like, okay, well, it looks like you really thought this through. And so as if to say, I would present something to you that I hadn't thought through. I mean, so just things like that. And it's just, boggles the mind. So that means they're looking past all of our qualifications. I have an undergraduate degree from Princeton in molecular biology. I graduated the top percents of my class. I have a PhD from Rockefeller University, where I was the top of my class, and my PhD mentor just won the Nobel Prize this year. Wow. So you're not going to get any higher academic qualifications. And then I worked in pharma as well as government in high positions. So from a qualification perspective, take my melanin out of it, this shouldn't be an issue, right? But it is. And so that to me was just stunning that they would kind of have that kind of response to our team. And my co-founders are equally accomplished in their areas. So that was really stunning. And then I'll share, another investor anecdote. I have one local investor when we came here, as we are finishing up our seed round, say to me with a straight face that, and our company involves a medical diagnostic that has to go through an FDA approval process, which we are on. And the FDA approval is a very important milestone for companies in my field. And when you get that, it really triples, doubles, quintuples your valuation. So I had an investor say to me, well, when you've gone through your FDA and gotten your approval, then we'll give you a check for $100,000. And I almost had to laugh out loud, because once I've gone through the FDA, I'm now worth $20 million. What do I need your $100,000?
Right. What do I need your money for at that point? Yeah, right.
And more importantly, I've seen other entrepreneurs who are not of color who get $5 million for just an idea. They don't have a business model. They don't have a patent. They don't even have a plan. They have an idea. And so I know that as the context. So that's why that kind of thing was really stunning for me, but it's sort of par for the course. And we have many other stories I could tell. I guess my take home point to everyone out there, particularly in the Main Street community, is Black entrepreneurs aren't asking for more. We're just asking for the same, just equal. If you're going to have that level of belief capital in non-minority entrepreneurs, that is people who just have an idea, have that same with me. And I use the adage that I learned when I was in Silicon Valley, where they said, hey, we like those entrepreneurs that have failed 9 times and the 10th one is like Facebook. I'm like, can I get my 9 times to fail? I'm like, I probably won't use them all, but I would love my 9 lives to just have the same amount of opportunity. So that's the perspective. And that's what I would say out there to the VC community. If you really want to see more entrepreneurs of color, and you've seen the numbers from Dr. Perry, why you need to support them, invest in them and do not move the bar for them higher than you would for anyone else.
Great. All right. In the interest of getting to everybody, I could follow up all afternoon with those comments, but let me get to some of the other panelists here. So Carmen, I'm going to go to you next, and tell us a little bit about the Black Business Empowerment Committee at the Loudoun Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, so I'm loving seeing all these faces out here. So, and I've been taking notes, so I have homework later. But I am the chair of the Black Business Empowerment Committee. We call it the BBEC. We started this committee probably in May of 2019. And our committee is dedicated to advocating, uplifting, and promoting the economic growth and development of Black businesses in Loudoun County. I have, through my PR company, I've been to a lot of the Loudoun Chamber's events to see if it was a good fit for different clients. And I would walk in the room, of course, I'm prior Air Force, so I have thick skin, but I'd walk in rooms and there was no one that kind of looked like me, right? And I said, okay. I walk in another room and no one looked like me. And so I knew that there had to be a change. We developed the Black Businesses Empowerment Committee to make sure that we have a presence and we can make changes in the Loudoun County community.
Mm-hmm. And how does your committee differ from a typical DEI committee?
Well, if you think about the DEI committee, it's so diverse. I mean, they're hitting all kinds of different projects and areas of interest. However, Black businesses need to be directed and given opportunities that aren't given other places. So we want to make sure that we have an education series, we have a speaker series, and that we are catering to the Black business. So we see that a lot of Black businesses aren't getting grants, awards. And why? Are they not submitting, to these awards, are applying for them? No one's saying anything, right? But we all notice that there's an issue. So in the classes, it's not going to just be business one-on-one, it's Black businesses one-on-one, because there's issues in the Black community that some other cultures don't deal with, right? We're talking about banking, we're talking about getting overlooked. Mm-hmm. We have to find out the reason why and make sure we're using our voices to speak out for those Black businesses and get them in the room so they can be seen, noticed, and get the grant money or any type of business like any other non-Black business.
Exactly. All right, next I'm going to go to Stacy Yee, and tell our attendees here today about Pillsbury's new Equal Justice Initiative and the Boss Lab.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak. Just to kind of give a little bit of background about the firm, because I think it places the initiative in context. Pillsbury is a full service AmLaw 100 firm. We have 20 offices, 14 here in the US, and 6 internationally, with almost 700 attorneys. And so earlier in June of this year, the firm held various shared experiences for our own attorneys and staff. And the purpose of those was really to provide a safe space for our own people to talk about how they were experiencing the social unrest that was going on at that time. One of the things that was very apparent as a result of those conversations was that, you know, the conversations are one thing, those are necessary, but they're just a start. And people were very passionate about actually doing something. As a result, Pillsbury came out with its Equal Justice Commitment and Initiative. And what it consists of is allocating $1 million in direct funding from the Pillsbury Foundation for different organizations. But on top of that, over the next 3 years, dedicating a minimum of $10 million in attorney and staff pro bono and volunteer services for various areas that we identified. I won't go into all of them. There's 4 kind of pillars that we're focusing on, but for purposes of today, we very much wanted to, and part of this is because of the work that our firm does and the fact that we have a very strong emerging growth and venture capital practice. We wanted to do something that, you know, was very much within our wheelhouse, so that we're dedicating our strengths to, you know, moving the ball forward in something that we thought was important to us. And one of the things we identified are, you know, the statistics that only about 1% of VC funding goes to Black founded businesses. And, you know, from my perspective, I think one of the reasons why that is because of structural, you know, racism in the different kind of, in the whole ecosystem, which to me is somewhat, you know, from where I stand on the law firm side, is somewhat similar to some of the systemic issues that have led to, for example, only 3% of women of color consisting of equity partners in law firms. So I think there's some similar issues. So we started the BOSS Lab, which stands for the Black-Owned Startup Support Lab. And as part of that commitment, what we've done is agreed to take on at least 50 startups over the course of the first year. For those startups, we're offering a maximum of, whether it's 20 attorney hours or $20,000 worth of attorney services, whatever the hire is, for startups that go through our vetting process and that are Black founded. In addition, we are going to look for the first year, 10 of those that seem to have the most potential and graduate them to stage 2 of our program, which is to essentially provide another 50,000 of services, 25%, with 25,000 of which will also be pro bono, and then 25,000 which would be deferred until a funding event. And so what I would say, I don't want to take up too much time, but I think one of the great things about this program is the fact that we've been able to engage attorneys who have not typically been involved in significant pro bono matters at the firm, because it's typically litigation oriented. So we're getting our corporate attorneys involved. We're also getting staff involved, because in addition to the actual legal services, we're also trying to provide other resources to these startups, including, you know, advising on, you know, our HR experts or our internal IT folks. Like, there's something that everyone can bring to the table, and there's just been such enthusiasm. It's just been very exciting.
Great. You know, the reason we wanted Stacy to speak today is we wanted to hold up Pillsbury as a model for other professional advisory firms, you know, that might be looking for what can we do to help remedy these structural racist outcomes in our society. And we thought it was a terrific. So Stacy, thanks for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
And Carlene, so when I said the Community Business Partnership was one of the most important nonprofits in the region, I meant it. Tell us a little bit about CBB's track record of support for Black-owned businesses, especially since 2008. You know, we were talking earlier about a Washington Business Journal article that came out on October 15th. It made the front page of their print edition a couple days later. Quoted an absolutely stunning statistic that Sheila repeated this morning, that lending to Black-owned businesses by the SBA has decreased by 84% since 2008. So if you could talk a little bit about community business partnership and what it's doing to counter that in the region.
Absolutely. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me on this session today. Community Business Partnership is one of those organizations, like you mentioned, is critical to help alleviate the challenge of what small businesses, specifically minority and those Black-owned firms. Since 2008, our organization has supported Black-owned businesses to the percentage rate of 40% of the clients coming into our doors, roughly 40% on average since 2008. And interestingly enough, of our overall numbers, we average between 60 to 67% of minorities, all included. Black-owned businesses, and I'll just share strictly from our data as we have it, women make up 67% of all businesses that we support. And so when we drill down and look at the numbers for Black-owned businesses, all of our services are being utilized by that segment of the population coming in to our doors. However, they are the least likely to come to us for funding.
Why is that?
We're talking about something that has gone on in this country for way too long. And I think we're at a stage now where talk is no longer good enough. Mm-hmm. Action is what we actually need. And here's what I have seen. In the years that I have been associated with the organization, I'm a Black female immigrant to this country, and I learned through all my connectivity with Community Business Partnership that, number one, Blacks in America don't trust the system. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So let's definitely speak to this. They don't trust the system to be there for them. So why should they come out here, put themselves out to, get exposed and then get denied? As Dr. Perry mentioned, we started with equity from our home. My husband and I did just that. And what we found out through this whole process is that we as immigrants, though we were Blacks, we were actually treated better getting access to funding versus African Americans, and that made me really angry. So when I look at the services that we offer here, Community Business Partnership is that organization that if anyone out there wants to partner with to reach the target audience, what we do have to do better at is really going out there to get them to better understand that we're here to help them to build that trust factor. That's one. Two, they have the historical perspective of going it on their own is something that still has to be overcome. And knowing that we're here to support them. The cultural differences that have come down through generations is also another factor, right? We have population here that we don't necessarily go out. We're talking about one of the biggest topics, money and the relationship to money. And so their relationship to money and credit, that's a whole other ball game that we here have been working to overcome and helping people better understand how to, literally, I call it play the credit game, to understand how those numbers play. then that gets into another thing that I always talk about is the fear factor. So we build an inclusive process here to help business owners really understand that we're here for them, that they see faces. Like, for instance, within our organization, we are as mixed as the mixing bowl that we have here within our organization. We have men, we have the male, female, Black, white, Hispanic, you name it, mixed in within our organization. So when folks come in the door, they're seeing that mix. The other thing,
they're seeing the diversity of the region,
exactly,
right? I mean,
exactly.
the 1/2 of all kids in Northern Virginia now live in immigrant families.
There you go. And so the other thing that I've seen, and this goes to me physically being here, understanding that their expectation is low when it comes to the potential help and support that they can get. When they do find us, we're like the hidden goal.
Right.
That when they
hardly believe it.
Right. And so we make that concerted effort to better help them to overcome the challenges. And so we've had cases of minority-owned, Black-owned businesses that we've taken from the idea stage to where they have over 100 employees. Or we just did one just a year ago before the pandemic hit, where we got her from in our office to a 3,700 square feet location right here in Annandale. So we have a track record of supporting businesses. What is critical is, again, access to capital. So we do need to continue building that concerted effort to build a pool of funds to help.
So in the interest of time, I just want to ask one question that I'm going to give each of you a chance to answer. And start with you, Andre, because you talked about, you know, the whole thing starts and ends with policy, right? We got to look at policy. We got to look at the policy that affects systems. And, you know, what steps can we each take? Each of you panelists have a really unique perspective here on these issues. What can we take to inject some accountability into the financial and economic systems? What can we do? Like what the Investment Act and make them report differently? What is it that will inject some accountability into these systems?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it won't just come from investment. There needs to be accountability.
That's right.
What happened with the Treasury and the PPP loan was just disastrous. And so there needs to be accountability. I wrote a piece that was, or a co-author on a piece by the Center for American Progress on revamping the Minority Business Development Agency. Now, of the CARES Act, of the $2 trillion CARES Act, the Minority Business Development Agency only received something like $10 million of it, something like that, some insanely low amount. And so we need to revamp it, we need to bolster it, and we need to have an accountability arm in it. And so that's one of my sort of solutions. And clearly the SBA, we need to talk about the resources. What I appreciate, and I'll just be very brief with this, businesses and philanthropy have stepped up in over the last 6 months. 6 months, in terms of making capital available. I can critique how it's going out into what kind of firms it's going to. We can critique that, but the point is that window is going to close pretty quickly. Eventually, government will have to pick up some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about making sure that the federal government picks up where corporations and nonprofit philanthropy have really actually led the way. For the first time in my life, I've never seen corporations say, we're giving this amount of money. Now, these billions may seem like a big chunk, but when you look at their overall profit and loss sheet, it's still a minuscule amount. But the point is, they're saying we need to deliberately invest in Black, brown firms. And that's what needs to continue at the federal level. But you're right, we need to infuse accountability in it.
Right. Tashaka, do you have any insight there?
Yeah, I agree the government needs to do more. I think the VC community, and this is my specific message to them, they need to do a lot more. That number of 1% is absurd. There's way more talented entrepreneurs out there of color that need a chance, just like everyone else. So even if you doubled that number, that means companies like mine could get more funding. And I recognize a statistic that shook me when we raised our seed round successfully of $2 million. We're now in that fraternity sorority of less than 100 companies throughout the country that are Black-owned majority that have done that.
Yep.
So if you just took that, and in this region, I don't even know how many that is, probably a much smaller fraction of that. So what I would say to the VC community, adopt the 2% rule. Something that Robert Smith, the financier, has been talking about for Wall Street. Do that for the VC community with regard to particularly Black tech entrepreneurs. And you'll see a difference, because it's not for lack of talent. The only thing that slows us down, our team, is the lack of access to capital. And our team is pretty tenacious, so it hasn't slowed us down as it may have others. But I worry about other minority entrepreneurs who wouldn't even get a chance to get started or keep their business going just because they couldn't access that early stage capital. And again, the numbers are what they are. I think Dr. Perry did a great job of showing what those numbers are, because they don't lie. But let's fix that right there, and they could do that. The community could decide, hey, we're going to give 2%, and everyone else can continue to get the other 98. But that will make a big difference even in the short term.
Great.
Can I just add one point to that, just very quickly?
Sure.
The VC community, it gets a lot of attention for a relatively small amount of investments overall for firms, right? When you look at the grand scheme of things, venture capital only represents like a fraction of the firms, but it's but it's also a symbolic statement. And so I think there is where the impact is. If you have all that visibility, from Shark Tank to all, when you start to see more capital being let out to Black, brown firms, it will inspire others. And so that's what I think the power in the VC world is. It's that the image, what they project is valuable.
So there's a question here, and the question comes from one of the attendees, Dan. I'm not pronouncing this right. Logue, Loague, and Dan says, could our group get an introduction to the speakers? We manage the Washington, D.C. Archangels and welcome the opportunity to engage with local startups and growth companies. So yes, we'll make that available to all of you. But let me take up one other question here in the box from our attendees. And why don't we start with you, Carmen, in answer to this? So the question is from an anonymous attendee, and it says, I work for a foundation that is very willing and able to invest in advocacy and organizing. Can you share what role advocates and organizers can have in expanding Black business ownership and investments? Essentially, this attendee is asking, what's the role of philanthropy in this? And Andre, you mentioned that philanthropy had stepped up in the past 6 months. What more could we do? Carmen, have you given that some thought? You're muted. You're muted here. There you go.
Well, that's an intense question. I will try my best. So chime in with this. However, when it comes to that, I really feel that I know in Loudoun County, there isn't a big presence for foundations, nonprofits, right? For Black people. Our percentage is probably less than 2%. And with that being said, I don't think that we know who they are. So I would say do some research. Maybe we need to provide some list of these different foundations, 501(c)s and so forth, because if we don't know who they are, then you can't assist. And me being the president of one foundation, 89 Ways to Give, I really have to be out there and promote. Luckily, our founder is an NFL legend, so it doesn't make it that hard for me to get out there and get on the news and the radio and so forth. But we need more presence in that area. And so it could be two-sided of knowing who they are and then helping, uplifting them and promoting them. I don't know if I answered it correctly. If somebody else wants to help with that one.
Carmen, I had a thought on that because, again, my mother works in the nonprofit community, so I've seen a lot of the impact that nonprofit donors can give. If you had a group of nonprofits or a single nonprofit that decided we wanted to, in this region, match the funds raised by any minority-owned, let's say, company, up to a certain percentage, that would go a long way, particularly tech companies. If you're trying to grow a tech company like ours, if we raised $2 million, there was a donor-advised fund or a donor fund out there that contributed another $2 million. That helps those companies because it helps them with their runway, and it'll help them create jobs and get to that next inflection point. So that might be, one low-hanging fruit, easy idea for the VC.
That's a good option. I never thought about that.
Yeah, Andre, have you given any thought, or Carlene, or Stacy, to philanthropy's role here?
Well, I'll say internally, we still need to look at the boards and employees of foundations. They're still mostly largely white, and representation matters when it comes down to who they invest in. And so I'll just keep it internal because, a lot of folks are saying, how can I invest? But they neglect to look at themselves. How can they invest in the human capital that will ultimately impact their investments? And so I would say, hey, look at your boards, look at your employees. And by the way, because even with corporations, that's something I've been saying too. Don't, all these companies letting out billions. I say the first thing you can do is look at your roles and look at who's working poor in your companies, who doesn't have benefits, because all those different things, will ultimately impact who starts businesses. And so for me, it's like, don't forget, it's not just about capital, while I strongly encourage capital. It's also about what are you going to do internally in your organization to change, to change when this moment in time goes away. Because look, people are already starting to relax. They say, oh, Biden's elected. There's no more riots in the street. I don't have to do as much, and then you come December or January 1, people are going to say, what happened to the billions of dollars? What happened to the initiative? What happened to the energy? And that can't change. So we need people in place to continue.
Right. And Carlene or Stacy, just a quick
I would just add to this conversation that it is important that our community realize that community business partnership is one of those sources that investors or philanthropic groups can continue to work with directly, whether through access to capital or other options. We are a community development financial institution, which is a designation through the Department of Treasury, considered a CDFI. So we have the connectivity and the bandwidth to get certain measures out there, whether it's direct access to capital for businesses or the actual support to help build those businesses. That's what we do. And so we are actually looking for that ongoing support. So investors, lenders, supporters, you name it, where we want that connectivity to continue and to grow.
And Carlene, just very briefly, what's interesting, during times of crisis, these are the few times you see these outlays of billions, trillions of dollars. And so we've got to keep pressing that we need to build capacity within our Black-led CDFIs, Black banks. Doyle's no longer here, but these are the times when you can invest in financial institutions.
Right.
And we got to press that because you won't see many times where you see this amount of capital going out. And so it's in times of tragedy that we should really be focused on demanding that people who have been hurt by discrimination over time really are supported at the start of any crisis.
All right, so we're past our time here, and I'm going to hand it over to Corey Holman, the chairman of the board of the Northern Virginia Black Chamber of Commerce. But thank you to Shaka and Sheila and Carlene and Stacy and Andre and Doyle.
Thanks, Eileen. Once again, kind of like Eileen already said, I want to thank everyone who participated. Hopefully, for everyone who was listening, you heard something that was beneficial to you. And you see on this panel and through our keynote speakers, we have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of passion. So I just encourage everyone to, take what you've heard, keep in mind some of the comments that Sheila, our executive director, mentioned earlier. And what are we going to do differently? What are we going to do differently as business owners? What are we going to do differently as community activists? And what are we going to do differently just as citizens to make a difference and help close this gap together? So just again, thanks to Andre, thanks to Doyle, to Shaka, Carmen, Stacy, and also Carlene. And we certainly want to thank the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia for partnering on this event. And so a recording of today's conversation will be shared with all participants. And hopefully everyone was inspired. So thank you so much, and go out and make a difference.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.